All right. Welcome, everybody. Excited to have everybody joining us for ADIO's webinar for top AI strategies to boost your go-to-market motion. Have an incredible panel here with Mallory and Lindsay, two of my favorite people to get to talk with. And we were already having fun before we hopped on here. But I think it's going to be a great topic. Obviously, AI is a big one for everybody right now. So it's kind of hard not to be interesting whenever you're talking about that. We're going to give it a couple of minutes for people to trickle in. Normally we'll ask, if you want to drop in your LinkedIn profile so that people can network, make some connections, let us know where you're joining from. It was interesting to see around the world. And then did you guys really want me to recount that story as our kickoff here?
I say go for it.
Yeah.
Why not?
So we touched on what people were watching during the pandemic, right before we ran out of time, and Tiger King came up, like, for a lot of people, and I've got a pretty funny story relative to that. So right around the time Tiger King was also the time everybody started discovering virtual backgrounds with Zoom, and so I was playing around with it, showing my kids and stuff, and one of the backgrounds was a Tiger King background. And at the time, in my office at the house, the previous owners of our house were big poker players, and so they had taken the room that became my office and turned it into a dedicated poker room, including flying an artist out from Vegas to airbrush a Vegas scene on the wall behind me. So that was my normal background, and so every time I got on a call, somebody would say something about it, whatever. But I've been showing how the virtual backgrounds worked, and with the Tiger King one, to my girls. Apparently it never got removed. And so I go on a webinar and I'm having to share my screen with the deck, and it's in full screen, so I can't see myself. And a couple of people said something about background, and I'm assuming it's the painting behind me. They're like, no, I ran an entire hour-long webinar with a partner with the Tiger King background going. So
Big fan of the work done over at the the world's most awkward zoo. I don't know what we call that, but
Need that recording.
But anyway, I think that probably killed enough time, so we can jump right into it. To get started, Lindsay, Mallory, why don't you do a quick intro, and then we can dive into the actual topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Cordell. I am Senior Analyst of Go-to-Market at Go-to-Market Partners, a small advisory firm that studies subjects such as AI. We're very focused on go-to-market and go-to-market technologies and helping companies align their product, marketing, sales, customer success, RevOps, and basically anything that we might consider front of house teams, so they can work more efficiently together and reduce some of the cost of go-to-market and hopefully keep a lot more people in business and keep a lot more boards happy. So that's what we're here to do.
Awesome. How about you, Mallory?
Awesome. Thank you. Mallory Lee, joining from Indiana. I am at Union Square Consulting. And so we are a fractional sort of RevOps as a service consulting firm. And I joined there a few months ago, so it's still kind of new and different. My past roles before that were operator roles, leading RevOps teams, and similar to Lindsay, just keeping that board happy, and there's a lot that goes into it. So excited to be here.
Awesome. And I guess I should introduce myself as well. So I'm Jason Hubbard. I'm COO here at RevGenius. Spent most of my career in marketing, demand gen, growth roles, as well as doing the ops side of things. So all of this is very near and dear to my heart, and very cool topic for us to go into. So to get started, we were kind of batting around some of this, before we hopped on, but obviously AI has come a long way in a very short time, especially in the business side of things, and this is after decade and a half, 2 decades of largely broken promises when it came to AI. For those of us that have been around long enough, like whenever this latest round of AI stuff started coming out, I'm sure most of your reactions were the same as mine. It's like, here we go again. All of these promises and nothing's going to actually come out of it and stuff. But, what have you guys seen with this? Obviously, things have moved really, really quickly here. So, where are we right now relative to where we were not very long ago?
I think what
Lindsay,
strikes
you
me
want
is
to start
just,
us, or go for it, Valerie.
oh, sorry, we might have a delay. I think what strikes me is just how much faster it can be implemented and built upon now versus before. And Lindsay, I remember you mentioned how blockchain actually had a lot to do with this and accelerated the speed. I don't know if you guys want to reiterate that for the audience, but I didn't know that. It was super interesting to me. So maybe everyone could use that soundbite.
Yeah. So one of the things, well, I can kind of kick us off on what got us here. So we've been studying AI now. We hosted our first webinar on AI last summer. And at that time, I would say more than half of the room had that same initial eye roll reaction of, you mean ML that we dressed up to look a little bit like AI? Are you sure? And I've been around the block and I have seen lots of ML, whether we're talking big companies building it, small companies building it. It has been out there and, kind of putting an AI outfit for quite some time now. And so the market was appropriately, suspicious of why is it different this time? And one of the things that really struck me over the past 12 months, all the learnings, obviously we're seeing real life learnings, and we're going to talk about that in a little while. But fundamentally, the technology stack didn't exist to support the AI that we all dreamed of 5 years ago, 7 years ago, when we were dressing up our ML as AI. But because of the advancement in computing and in the development of blockchain, and honestly, quite frankly, when we think of cryptocurrency and how people mine for that, and then Jason, I want you to weigh in here too. You're much more appropriate discussing this, but there's been a culmination of technological advancements in a couple of different areas that have been able to be repurposed to support legitimate AI model development and true learning. That's really, I think this time it's real, which is just, it's so cool to finally be there after all the not false starts, but the hopeful starts. So Jason, maybe give us a little bit with your tech knowledge, a little bit of
yeah. So
to be.
Yeah, the hardware has really driven where we're at right now with it. Obviously, there's been all kinds of stuff done on the research and software side and all of that stuff, but the hardware has really been the thing that's driven this giant leap that we're seeing. And for those that are not familiar, the hardware is primarily around GPUs, so graphical processing units. And so GPUs historically were primarily used for exactly what it sounds like, rendering stuff on a screen. The really advanced, GPUs and stuff were being built primarily for PC gaming. But then, it turned out GPUs were also extremely good at working through blockchain to be able to do mining of things like Bitcoin. And so whenever people were building Bitcoin mining rigs and stuff like that, especially as the cost from a horsepower standpoint kept going up and up, relative to getting those net new coins mined, that became the centerpiece of those rigs. And so that was really the only way that you could do that, especially at any sort of a scale. And at the same time, you had sort of a resurgence on PC gaming front. This is the reason why, like during COVID, it was so impossible to get your hands on a GPU, and they were going for 2-3 times the retail price on it because of those two competing factors with it. And so all of this put a lot of money behind that, put a lot of development in it. And you may ask, like, why is something designed to render something on a screen effective for AI? Well, if you can anticipate what needs to be rendered and do any pre-rendering before it's needed on the screen, then obviously you can do that much more efficiently, much quicker, and at a much higher resolution. And so, there's an actual AI predictive element to what's going on in the GPU and trying to get it, out ahead of having to do something in real time, which is where it gets really, really resource intensive. And so that's the long-winded explanation from a hardware and market standpoint of how we wound up where we are right now. But it's really the hardware that's driving it. And if anybody was wondering, why is NVIDIA's stock so astronomical right now? Well, guess who's the leading hardware manufacturer of those GPUs? It's NVIDIA.
I think for a moment there, we were actually pulling cards out of our old machines and selling them on eBay during COVID. I just had a flashback. Speaking of Tiger King, that being said, so like back to the practical application of this. So here we are almost a year later since we hosted our first webinar on it. I know Rev Genius, you guys were right there alongside with us as we were observing this technology really start to take off. And we're to 90% of the room believes that AI is going to be changing the way they're working, that it's real AI, that it's not pure ML. They believe, like, they are prepared, and like companies that, what I'm really loving is that not older, because I hate saying like 15-year-old companies don't feel old because they were when I started my career, but they are finding new and exciting ways of embedding true AI into probably places where they did have ML, or where they had nothing, and that everything was expected to be done in manual piece part, usually by somebody from RevOps or marketing operations, to make these things come together and facilitate a lot of go-to-market goals that AI has been able to support. And so it's been so fun to watch these like promises of years like really start to come into fruition. And we can get into the details on that if that's of interest to y'all on the chat. But that's what I'm seeing right now that has been the big game changer. There's lots of AI point solutions out there. There's lots of people that are developing that don't totally know what they have, which is so exciting. Mm-hmm. In SaaS, we haven't had that for a little while. We've had a lot of people very worried, worried about making sure that ROI is happening on the companies they're investing in, which makes it harder to do these kind of outside of the box. So I've gotten to know several outside of the box technologies that they're like, I don't know why I'm building it, but I'm pretty sure it's going to change the world. And then we've got some established companies that are utilizing pieces of it. We've got MLP side of it's being used. I see pieces of it being used in data consolidation, data correction. So it's being infused into a lot of what is out there. So I think it's just going to make us all better, stronger, faster over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yep. Let me call out something that you had mentioned there, Lindsay. You guys let us know what direction you want us to take this. This is an incredible panel, so we can unpack all kinds of stuff. We don't have like a scripted talking points or anything like that. So if there's things that you want us to be able to touch on, or priorities on your side, please drop those in, and we'll try and tailor where we're going with things accordingly. I don't know about you guys. One of the things that's been most challenging for me with the AI stuff is just how fast it's moving. Like every time I go in and I start looking at, the updates, or I pause and, they've sent me a new release, documentation or something like that. It's like, geez, like how many new things are in there? And so it's like every time I feel like I'm just barely starting to get my arms around like capabilities and what I can do with it, it's like now there's something entirely new with it. Have you guys run into the same thing? If so, like how are you managing sort of that drinking through the fire hose?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, Jason. And I've seen firsthand a couple of people who have built a tool of their own, only to have a vendor come along and build the same thing a couple months later. And so you put all this time and effort into it, and maybe you're an enthusiast, and so it's fun anyway. You tinker with it at night and you get something really cool built. And then, it just comes out from your Salesforce vendor that you already use, or like Gong or whoever it is. And so the work you did, you have to decide, do I want to keep using my version, or do I just want to adapt what the vendor's done? Chances are, I guess I would say my preference is to see what the vendors are going to do with it, because it does move so fast that anything I do myself, it almost feels futile. Like I'm letting the vendors, do the leading, and I'm waiting to see which features I want to adopt. But I do think that the creation of these AI features will help people make decisions about vendors in the future. So I think it's a really important part of everybody's strategy. But like you're saying, it goes so fast, it's hard to keep up.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because so I think at this point, we all know, we've got the message, been a year. that AI will make us faster. But I get a lot of people ask this, but like, how should I be using it to write my emails? And then people are very funny because they like to put things in kind of fatalistic terminology, I guess, if you're a salesperson, but like, can AI replace my salespeople? Can I? And so kind of like outlandish, but what people are actually looking for, what they're searching for, is that ceiling. So like, where is that ceiling for me? And what ladders do I need to put in what place? And to your point, Mallory, like, what vendors can I partner with that will give me an elevator so that I don't have to pull out the ladders? So it's all so the way I look at it, and like, if I were just starting from scratch in a company and they were like, I have no AI, where do I begin? So one of the things that's really interesting is I would be looking for those time sucks. Like, what are those non-value add churn, the tasks you churn on, or quite frankly, let's say we all have a to-do list of 35 elements on it and we can only legitimately do 15. What of those other 20 could AI support you with? So I'm looking for it to make things faster. So here's a super basic example. We do a lot of writing and go-to-market partners. We produce papers, white papers, guides, all of the above. I have a tendency of switching voice mid-writing. Can't stop myself from doing it. I can't. I asked ChatGPT to pull all passive voice out of all of my writing for me. I was doing that with Grammarly support by hand last year. It's being done in seconds for me today. Seconds. That was hours of my life was spent proofing before I sent it to secondary proofreading. That was a bad use of my time, but I had no other option, and now I have an option. So what do we have in the optional space? The other thing that I like in a more sophisticated side of the house with what AI can do. So that's a super basic use case. When I'm looking at the more sophisticated things, especially like, and Mal, I'd love your opinion on this from a RevOps perspective. A lot of, well, the number one thing that RevOps people will tell you is that their CRM data is a disaster and they want no one to look at it, and they are ashamed of what they have in their closet. Even if it's been their closet for 5 years, they'll say that. Maybe not Mal, but pretty much everybody else in the world. And so one of the things that I've really enjoyed, quite frankly, watching vendors do is they have been trying to help us from damaging ourselves with bad data and bad integrations and bad connection points between all of these different systems that now, quite frankly, just get dumped into our Salesforce instance. We're finally at that stage where we can use this AI to look for gaps in information that a human brain used to have to do. Like, I had the spreadsheets, I did the pivots, I looked for the words, I found the gaps because I was smart enough to see that. Now the AI is getting to the point where it can do that for me. And that was a terrible use of my time. And so even if it gets 40% of the gaps, that's saving me 40% of that slog, where I was doing that by hand, being like, oh, that data point belongs here. That's an outlier. I know what happened with that deal. We shouldn't incorporate that into our ACV. Like, I was doing that all by hand with my own tribal knowledge. It's being able to replace some of that. So that's been some of the stuff that I think is super exciting. So number one, find those things that you do that take forever and see whether we're talking vendor solution or homegrown just by you and ChatGPT sitting down and having a cool conversation. Like, you should be looking for ways to eliminate waste in your work and lag in your work so you can go faster, be smarter, be better.
Yeah, I love that you said that, Lindsay. I tell my team all the time, it's like, anytime you find yourself more than 2 or 3 times doing the same thing, and it's to any degree resource intensive or a time suck, let me know, because there's almost always a better way to do it. Like, oftentimes I can fully automate it, at least partially automate it, but certainly almost always there's a better way to do it. And, having AI as a tool in that toolkit whenever you discover those things is huge. But Mallory, what about you on your side of things?
Yeah, I think there's these moments where you really do feel the shift and you feel things change. Like, I can remember starting out as an analyst at ExactTarget when I discovered pivot tables. And it was like, hold on, my world changed forever, right? And I also have these vivid memories of like getting to the office really early, jamming out to like Michael Jackson, going through my spreadsheet, doing the control find, finding keywords, replacing them with, a color so I could shade the box because it contained a word I cared about, and then sort and normalize. I was doing all this manually to do like a close lost analysis. I mean, those days are so over now, and it's insane. Like, I'm friends with the guys over at Myco, Trevor, and they have this concept where you're basically taking your data, putting it into their system or connecting Salesforce and talking to your spreadsheet, talking to your data. And some people, they get really stiff when you say that because they're like, ooh, but my data's not great. And so, to your point, Lindsay, use the tool to find the bad data. It can do that. It can look for the things that don't match. It can find outliers. It can help you normalize. And then once you get it to a place where you like it, then you start asking the questions. It's like, okay, this data is in a pretty good spot. Then you just re-import that stuff back to Salesforce, right? Because you've done the work to change it. And you're really you're letting this machine do the work for you. Never again should we have to sit and shade the cells that contain, a competitor's name anymore. Never again.
I'll never forget joining. Go ahead, Lindsay.
I was just going to say, filter for competitor, block, color block. Look at the money, look at the sum on the bottom, write it into another spreadsheet. It was insanity. And there were we knew there were better ways then, but now, and to your point, Mal, on the talking to your data, one of my favorite features that I have seen, Mal and I in RevOps, no strangers to building a dashboard for every whim of every thought that every leader has ever had. And it's been incredible to watch people type in natural language. What was my win rate last month in SMB? The way a human would ask a question, and to watch the filters just plop into place inside of these reporting systems. It's like, that's the way it should have always been. It shouldn't have had to have been, oh, we have 5 fields that represent SMB. Therefore, only Mallory knows which of the 5 fields for this particular query should be leveraged. And it's really going to create accessibility for information. And I think that we'll probably look back 10 years from now and be like, man, we were making a lot more decisions off of gut intuition and recency bias than we probably wanted to admit. And there's probably some companies that would still be around today, but they really were actually making data-driven decisions. And I bet that the data was just convoluted enough that they didn't have time to manipulate it the way they needed to. And they had to make a call that day, and they made a call based off of instinct. And I bet that has happened much, much more than people truly have absorbed. And I'm very much looking forward to a more data-driven decision-making world, because the data is much more accessible, and you can talk to it the way you would talk to a friend, and you can ask it questions, and you can confirm why. Are you sure those are SMBs? Are you sure those industries are represented? And it can tell you, yeah, I included manufacturing in that report, or no, I didn't. There's no SMB manufacturing clients in our list. Sorry, that's not a thing. It can tell you that now. It's amazing. It's absolutely fantastic. Sorry, Jason.
Oh, no. Thank you. And I think what you described there is at heart, when AI is used well or used properly, that's what it's doing. It's elevating where we come in as human beings into the equation. And for too long, we've been spending so much time and effort and energy just trying to digest what's there, or even get it in a digestible place and format, versus actually going and doing the things that we want to do on top of that. And obviously, if you can't ever even get there, then you can't do any things on top of that. And so being able to elevate us to that point where we can actually focus on those true value add things, as opposed to this undifferentiated heavy lifting we've all been having to do for so long. And case in point, never forget coming into Rev Genius, like one of the first things I had to tackle was, hey, our partners are asking for all of the slicing and dicing of demographics, and hey, we need to do better targeting and segmentation and all of that stuff. And it's like any marketer or demand gen person's nightmare. It's like, I've got 18,000 different titles that I need to bucket into a handful of categories, and I've got 2,000 industries and it's just like, holy good God, where do you go with all of this? And so at the time, this was pre-ChatGPT and all of the other AI stuff. And so like what we did was literally exported the whole thing and then went through by hand and normalized it. Like, we had some shortcuts where it was like, hey, what are some of the, some people had some stuff out there where it was like, hey, these are common, categorizations you may have, which got us probably 70, 80% of there. But then we had another 20% we had to just go by hand. And then once it was cleaned up, like you could just upload it and fix everything. But then every net new piece of data you have is now out of whack. So then we went to the next stage of hard coding all of that matching. So that every time a record came into the system, like, talk about a project. Holy crap. Like, that was my biggest project, biggest lift for the first quarter I was here. And so that's, really highlights like that undifferentiated heavy lifting that we're all having to do to even try and get to the place we're trying to get to.
We sound like those people who are like, I had to walk uphill both ways to school. And that's who we're going to be in like a couple years.
So we touched on it here, but interested to hear your guys' takes on it. Obviously, there's some things that are good fits for AI, and then there's some things that are round pegs and square holes. And back to what I was saying at the start of like it moving so fast, part of what it challenges me with it is I'll go try something as a use case, and it's like, yeah, that doesn't fit, that doesn't work. And then it's like I may come back a month or two later, it's like, well, crap. now they've pushed out an update that now makes that viable. But what are some of the things that you guys have seen that's a particularly good fit, and or what are some things that you see where it's like, yeah, that was not a good idea?
Yeah, so
we had a sorry, we keep talking at the same time. There was a question in the chat actually about security. And so from my standpoint, one of the only real hesitations I've had so far is about that confidentiality and security. And there are some companies that want their employees to hold back a little bit what information you're willing to like put out there into the ether. So I would highlight that as one potential bad fit. Is just information that's way too confidential to put out there. Beyond that, I think the image generation was pretty bad in the beginning. It's gotten a lot better. So that's one of those things, Jason, like you're talking about. At first, you're like, this is garbage. And, a couple months later, it's not bad at all. But yeah, Jason, what have you handled with like the security aspect of this?
Yeah, so I'm not working with companies that are particularly security sensitive or whatever, but the vendors themselves, like ChatGPT, like Google, have been pretty fast acting and putting safeguards in there where you can sort of micromanage what's being localized to your specific GPT or your specific model versus what's being ingested above and beyond there. And so leave it to others to make their decision on how much they want to trust that. But because there has been sort of a constant trickle in the news of like, oh yeah, that was still coming through whenever it technically shouldn't have or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's also something that I think is a little bit overblown from a security standpoint, because the idea that like this getting pushed into a global model that's then going to be able to, that needle in a haystack, be pulled back out by somebody else, like it's just by the nature of it. Like it's going to be very hard for that information to be accessed directly and tied back in any sort of a valuable contextual way. How about you, Lindsay?
Yeah, so a couple of things I've noticed are I will have some clients whose companies will demand a particular flavor of AI is the one that company will work with, and it has to do with that company's rules and regulations regarding data transfer. So I've got companies who can use Bard, like their marketing team can use Bard, but they're not allowed to use ChatGPT. So there's some elements there. Tends to happen in more niche industries where I think information is a little more critical. So like clean energy, medical, that sort of thing. There's also providers out there like that are blending what they call the external reg or the external data set. And then you've got your internal data set siloed, and then you pay a company to help you blend the two concepts. So your data is not going into the world, and you have to pay somebody to help you keep your stuff behind a walled garden or in a clean room or however you have it. Like part of me fears, like we were just talking about, like, oh, just put in your sales data into ChatGPT and have them fix it. And then next thing you know, you Google, like, what is the average sale price of a marketing solution? And it's there. But to your point, Jason, I do think that some of this is like, be smart. It's new. But also be realistic. Like, one line of data from one input, like ChatGPT is not taking that as gospel and then writing it in its special memory, and now forever and ever the world will know how much you spent on 6 cents compared to somebody else. And then the other thing, so like there's got to be a little bit of grace, but also a little bit of realism here. And they're not going to be able to organize this information for millions of people doing this all at the same time in any way that's going to like single you out in the future. Mm-hmm. The one thing that that people worry about a lot, which I think is really interesting, is the concept of hallucinations, right? So this concept of Chat GPT is going to take in a bunch of information, tell me lies. I'm going to base my plan on these lies, and then I'm going to be in some hot water. And one of the things that I think is really interesting, some of that I think might be a little bit of human fear, wanting to say like, yeah, but I'm still the smartest computer in this relationship between me and ChatGPT. But I mean, thinking about how often we're wrong in our jobs, or how often we as humans make incorrect assumptions about things, can be like, I think, a little bit chastening in terms of like, okay, like it gave me one piece of wrong information and one query, and then I restructured the query a couple of times and I got a different answer that's correct 3 or 4 more times. And that's the same as if you were Googling and you were reading articles about things as well and observing that information yourself. So I think when it comes down to it, companies that have these kind of niche capabilities, I think, are going to be the ones that shy away from the external data access. Companies that have more generalized capabilities, more generalized information sets, they're going to be free to interact. The hallucinations are a little bit overblown. Like, you should never just take ChatGPT's response as gospel any more than you would take Googling and reading one document and saying like, oh, okay, this is how I'm going to run my business off of this. And finally, like, there are companies out there that will partner with you to help you. So like a good example, you.com is a company I'm watching right now. They are bringing together internal and external data sets. They've got the walled garden in place. They're actually they're an aggregator. They're sourcing from ChatGPT, from Bard, from a couple of the different models out there to give you responses, and they're including citations in those responses. So there is a lot to learn. I would treat it like you're Googling, but you're just Googling 10x all at once, and then you're just going to have to parse through the information like that.
Yep. And I mean, I think one of the most effective things that I've heard and used relative to the hallucinations is just ask it to cite its sources whenever it spits something out. And so, okay, now you can very quickly go and spot check. Okay, did that look like it was reliable? The same way that you would look at a Google search and say, okay, how reliable is that? Mallory, what's challenging or perplexing for you within this? And I loved the example about the image. That was one of the features that came out that I was like, oh man, I wish I had known that came out earlier, because for anybody that's played around with it, like at first it was very hit or miss, and then it got to be pretty darn good. But the missing part was you couldn't fine tune it. Like, it's like, hey, take exactly what you did there, but do this, and it would spit out a whole new image, not a tweak of what you had done. It was just like, dear God, it was like image generation roulette, trying to get exactly what you wanted. And so whenever you finally had the ability to fine tune it and isolate the things that you wanted fixed, that was huge. But what are some of those on your side?
Yeah, I think for myself, this may or may not be counter to what a lot of people think, but I've never loved the writing that I've seen come from ChatGPT. And I've tried to use it before to write an article. I talked to it for a long time, and I said, take everything I just said and make it an article. And I just didn't like it. And I don't know if I needed to like train it better on my voice or something, but I do know there are some companies that prohibit their teams from using it for writing, because it just all sounds the same. You can tell it's AI written. It's not unique enough, and it's not their brand voice. So I would say that's the one place where I myself am still quite skeptical that it's going to be able to write for me. But I think it probably depends on what you're writing and who you're writing it for. So that's my 2 cents.
The one area I think it does a pretty good job of writing is cold sales copy, which is like when you compare it to some of the crap that people are producing, it's a pretty low bar, but
Low bar.
I'm right there with you, Jason. In terms of like that's the sales copy, the emails. So we partner with 2 companies, Reggie, who they have Reggie and Lavender. They have 2 very different perspectives on how much control AI should be given. Reggie is willing to hand the keys over to the AI to run full, I mean, like the voices, like they will be the SDR. Robots will call your prospects and say, hey, would you like a meeting to talk about this? So it can get pretty intense on what they can take over. Lavender is a little bit more of a co-pilot arrangement. But one thing I know for sure is, and my clients, I'm sorry if you're hearing this. Like I cannot receive another bad sales email and be like, what's wrong with this? Be like, guys, get Lavender. I can't, we can't do this anymore. We're done having opinion-based discussions. There's statistical information available to help us understand when email copy is good and when email copy is not consumed easily. And we don't need to sit in a circle anymore and write SDR emails, which we were doing, and it was working and it helped for years. But those are just one of those moments where it's very interesting to understand. And once you've got the data, so for example, what Lavender has discovered is that writing emails at higher than a 3rd grade level, it's hard for people to consume that information. And so keep it simple, keep it sweet. And it's very hard to do. We want to put in adjectives about our solutions. We're the best. We've helped so many. We are passionate. And then meanwhile, like these solutions are coming through and they're like striking out all the adjectives. Like, what is it you do? Just tell them that. And those are the emails that are performing better. It's empirically, data backed. Those are the ones that are performing better. So I think there's a little bit of like letting go of like our pride in things, letting go of the fact that we feel like we're saying these things out loud, but that's the voice in our head. When people are reading them, like, I don't know if you guys saw Inside Out 2, but there's this hilarious moment where she's like shouting across the sarcasm and it's like completely changed. She said the same words and she heard them on the other side of the sarcasm sounded like so negative. I'm like, how often is that happening with detailed emails? Keep it short, keep it sweet, keep it bulleted, and there you go. Like that is, so anyways, those are some of the interesting things, but I was like, I cannot have another conversation about a sales email for the rest of our lives. That is what AI has given us as a gift.
But I think that's a great point within this is I think where people get in trouble a lot of times with trying to leverage AI is being too broad with what that application is. And I think if you get down to sufficient specificity with what you're having it do, then more often than not, you can find a really good dialed in way to leverage it. But whenever you go too broad, too wide with it, then that's when you can start getting in trouble. And so, you can find specific use cases where writing copy is, a great use for it. And then you can find others where it's like, it's not. And, you wind up people kind of going one extreme or the other. It's like, you should never use it to write copy. Or you should always use it to write copy. No, we don't need copywriters anymore. And it's like, no, it's like, it's somewhere in the middle and it's all about how you use it. Because, it's a tool. Like any tool, it's, you've got to be careful with that. And, I know talking about the 3rd grade level, one of the most valuable things I ever had that I had to do with my writing, I was working on a doctorate in philosophy, and my professor used to love to give us an assignment where like, you need to cover this, 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 this. And I would sit down and I would write it, and it would come out 2 to 3 times longer than my word count limit. And so then I had to go, like, I couldn't go and pull like sections or like things I had to touch on. Like he had done all of this intentionally. I had to go cut like half to 2/3 of what I had written. And it was like, talk about dialing in what you're doing and what you're saying and how you're saying it. Like, it's so valuable with that. But trying to think, there was something a direction I was gonna go with it, but anyway, so actually, I do remember. So yeah, we touched on this a little bit on the hey, I'm reluctant to go plug my data into this and start asking questions because my data's not in a great shape, not in a great place, and so and that gets also to sort of the hallucination pieces of it, and we're back to the same adage that we've been at for a long, long time: garbage in, garbage out. And so how do you guys tackle that, relative to your use cases with it? Because, you need to be one at a minimum confident that, what's being brought into it, what's being leveraged, whether, if that's third party, external, whatever is reliable. You need to be careful with what you're providing it and feeding it is going to be reliable on your side. And so, how do you manage that aspect of it? Mallory, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I actually have a fun story here that involves Lindsay. So at my last company, we hired Lindsay to help train our sales team on Medic. And we are adopting this as a new selling methodology. And my personal preference when I start to introduce something brand new to sales is to not give them super regimented pick lists and the information that I'm asking for. Because if they don't know the answer, they're just going to pick the first option and turn their head and walk away. So we left this as open text for a little while. Tell me the metrics they're after. Tell me the paper process. They had to type it in. And we didn't restrict them. It didn't have to be long. It didn't have to be short. But after a period of time, we took all of those answers and fed them to the robots, and they made the pick list, right? And so this is a cool way to basically let your data start out organic and then put it into a codified system. Then roll that back out to the team in a way that says, hey, we read all your responses. We talked to the leadership. This is what we're going to go with as our list of metrics. And so you're kind of, it's a circle, whatever. It's a bad analogy. Like, it's a circular process of figuring out how to make it more governed by letting it be a little bit more organic at first. But that was a fun use case for getting cleaner data. And I think we all know pick lists, they give us cleaner data. It gives us a chance to standardize. But it was a nicer way to let people weigh in on like what those choices would be.
I love that, Val. It's such a good example. So on one of the things that I find really challenging about the consolidation of third party, first party intent combined with your historical revenue data, that's a lot of connection points that need to come together. Layer in the fact that we have built our systems to force attribution for, like, I'm the one who did this. Like, Mel and I used to work at Terminus, and ABM is notoriously difficult to prove like full attribution across the path. So we had to do it. We did A/B testing. We did a whole bunch of stuff, but eventually we just got to the point where we were like, we were a part of this story. And so now we've got multiple point solutions inside of our customer journeys, whether we're talking CMSs or MAPs or your ABM solution. Oh my gosh, 3-letter acronym, you guys to death. I'm so sorry. But whatever solutions you're using to develop your customer journey and present value to prospective buyers and then to your customers themselves, it's a lot of data that's coming together. And sometimes it's being dumped into Salesforce, and sometimes it's showing up in Gong, and sometimes it's showing up in a couple of other places. So one of the things that I've been really hot on lately, and so I'm going to do some name dropping, but by all means, like, take a look at the market. I'm not here to sell anything, but Infinigrow, GrowBlocks, Hockey Stack, these are solutions that sit on top of your revenue engines and look end to end from third-party intent behavior that you might be capturing from Bombora or from a bunch of different other third-party intent providers. 6 Sense has a few options as well. I mean, there's just a lot of different ways to collect third-party intent these days. And it's aligning that information. The one thing that always gets my goat whenever we're talking about syncing up customer journeys like that is incorrect assumptions, right? We did a VID lookup, did the reverse IP. It's right 40% of the time, 60% of the time it's wrong. This is the wrong attribution path. It just doesn't belong to that customer journey. So what do we do? And the reality is what we were doing is I'm physically pulling the data out of all of these systems, lining them up myself, putting it into a BI tool that's sitting in the BI tool. The BI tool is not matching the source systems, but I can't have it because it was wrong. The source system was wrong to begin with, and it's just super aggravating. What these systems are allowing for is the management of overrides. And I think that has been my new favorite thing that has come. So we're doing the we're doing the AI-based model. We're connecting all the tissues. We're connecting all the dots. We know how this customer has experienced this complex B2B buying journey. And we know that piece is wrong. State the outlier, get it out of the system. It stays there forever. So the management of outliers becomes a part of the data set. And now I feel a lot more confident going back into the universe and seeing what was the ACV for people who read my white papers versus the people who didn't read my white papers. I don't know if it's important. I don't know if I should be looking at it, but at least now I can do it with confidence. And so outlier management alongside that more sophisticated way of connecting the multiple data sources, and then also kind of getting rid of the like race to attribution that a lot of these companies were forced to put into their systems, whether or not it was 100% like true or otherwise. All of that has been able to be brought to the surface in a new way because of that AI coming in, connecting the dots, seeing the things, finding the outliers, telling us what the outliers are, keeping track of the outliers so I never have to see it again. It's been very cool. So I think that's the thing that I'm most excited about. And so I'm very hot on these vendors that are able to see the whole universe and understand the outliers and generate custom models for you and time bound the way we really need them to, time bound by industry and by segment. It's been really cool. So that's it's like the stuff of RevOps dreams that you, quite frankly, we weren't able to, we knew we always wanted to do it. We never had the manpower and the throughput to do it right.
Yeah, I think about it all the time because it's like, dear God, I wish I had AI at my fingertips, but I came pretty close to what you're talking about as far as that dream when I was running growth at Astronomer. And like the amount of data we had, like we owned the open source Airflow project. And so, if you're not familiar with it, don't worry about it. But, that's a project that has millions of downloads a month. And so, owning that in the sense that we, our developers, our engineers were writing 70+% of the commits to the core code. And so the upshot was all of the publicly available documentation, guides, KVs, you name it, were built, hosted, managed by us. And so if you were interested in Airflow, if you were anything, like you were going to hit our website at some point and you were going to be consuming highly technical documentation. And so, that gave me incredible insights into not just who was qualified, what they were, all the way down oftentimes to like, hey, what systems are they needing to plug into? What are their pain points? What are they stuck on? Like, so by the time a rep had their first demo or call with them, I could feed them like this incredible amount of information. And we were pulling in like job change data and stuff off of ads and first party intent signaling off of emails and all of that stuff. But like to be able to get there, like we had raised nearly $1 billion. We were taking all of this stuff, eating our own dog food, pushing it into a Snowflake data lake. I went and poached a top-tier analyst from DraftKings to go run the entire thing. It's like, that was a dream for me, but there was no other situation or scenario where I would have been able to go build that thing. And it's like now I could sit down with ChatGPT or one of the other AIs and feed it the same data we were collecting and be able to do the exact same thing we were doing there. And that's remarkable. I mean, that was easily $500,000 invested, easily at least, for us to try and build something like that.
It's so funny because so we were at a conference in New York last spring, and I said something to the effect of like a lot of our data is cooked, and it was true. It was right after it was beginning of 2023. We had the 2022 downturn, a lot of our historical data that we were basing like sales cycle velocity, industry of interest, like a lot of our pipeline data had been pretty badly damaged by some of the uncertainty happening in the marketplace. And it's like, your data is cooked. And the guy from IBM leaned over to me after my speech and said, my data's fine. It's like, well, I know your data's fine. You are not the average bear in this story, sir.
Well, we've got 10 minutes left, and I know we've got some good questions that people have asked. I want to make sure we get to those. But I think the question that Carrie asked fairly early on is pretty topical to where we're at right now in our conversation. So Carrie had asked, I don't have a lot of budget to spend on a bunch of disparate tools. So how can I use AI to enable our sales team, i.e. finding companies that fit our ICP, identifying our key BPs, within those companies, crafting highly personalized outreach emails, all of that stuff. And I want to get your guys' take on it, but for me at least, it really comes down to that, garbage in, garbage out thing. You've got to make sure that you feed it enough reliable data and details for it to be able to go and generate something back to you. And so, the more I look at AI as essentially the way I would onboard or train or manage a team member, the better that works. And so, sometimes they've got more background and, knowledge they can bring to bear, and it takes less, sometimes more. And you got to sort of evaluate that on the fly. But, to turn them loose with no input, no guides, no anything like that, and expect them to generate and put back in your hands something reliable is something most of us know better than. And if you don't, it doesn't take many times to learn that lesson. And AI is really no different.
Yeah, so when I think about, and keep in mind, we coach strategy before action at Go-to-Market Partners. And so when you say we have an ICP, like I really want you to know what that ICP is. Like, I don't need your firmographic data set, mid-market, SaaS, high tech in San Francisco. Like, that's who we sell to. Like, okay. Like, I really want you to think through who you want with great specificity. Who are your best customers? Look at your products and your features. What segments of buyers out there can your features really delight? And I would give that information to the team. And then after that, it's amazing. Once we have that base, real true knowledge of who we want our customers to be, it arms your sales team with that blueprint that quite frankly they've been missing. And then they can put into ChatGPT, find me let's say our companies, let's say we sell an HR solution and we sell best into companies that are, really care about their corporate culture. There are 25 corporate culture conferences in the US, probably majors and probably 50 minors. Who went to those conferences? Ask ChatGPT. Ask them what those conferences are. Like, it is going to get you a little bit closer. And no SDR had time to paw through the internet and figure out. So do you know what they were doing? They went to SalesNav and they pulled over contact data from companies in the mid-market that had HR people. Like, this is where we were this is where we were at 3 years ago. That's why outbound is so expensive right now, because we were volume players and it's just not working anymore.
Oh, yeah.
And so setting that expectation of be really specific in a way that if you can't communicate it to ChatGPT with enough specificity to get good lists, you're not communicating it to your sales team with enough specificity to get good lists. So start there, get that locked, really spend some time on it. Look at your current customers, look at your feature set, look at what the market can support. Then, I was sitting on with a client today. I said, okay, tell me about one of your favorite customers. Type in, what are 5 companies that are just like this customer? Tell me why they're just like that customer. And 5 answers came out. And she was able to look at them and be like, yeah, that's a pretty quick list right there of people that fit all of those characteristics that I just described. And so think of it as just this shorthand shortcut. In an ideal world, eventually you'll get good enough about what you want. So that's the other side of this. So I would not advocate just going out and buying any tech any more than I would advocate going and buying a marketing automation platform without a strategy or buying an ABM solution without a strategy. Define your strategy, know what you want to do, take those use cases to the vendors when you're ready to buy and say, can you do it this way? But test it first in the freemium solutions that are available out there, get it working, and then start shopping those use cases out to the vendors. You'll be so much better for it. They'll be so much better for it. So test, know your ICP. And if you can't speak with enough specificity, get together as a team, the team of humans that work for your company, get them to define the attributes, take that to the machinery, and then let the machinery take it from there. That would be my advice.
Amen on begin with the goal or the problem and work backwards from there. I see way too many like, hey, let's go find the solution without a clear idea of like, what's your use case? What are you trying to solve for? Whatever. And I mean, talk about a recipe for failed onboardings and tech bloat. Yeah, exactly.
And churn.
Mallory, yeah. Mallory, how about you?
Yeah, I would echo that. Like, get the strategy in place first. I think for a long time now, we've been able to leverage machine learning to help us understand how to score. I love it for that. Like, I remember back when I worked at Pardot, we had a suggested scoring model and it was behavior based. And so people would say, how should I change this? And I'd say, just let it run for a while, see what stands out to you, make the tweaks manually, do it by gut, you know your business. And that's not necessary anymore. Like, we can use machine learning and AI to understand what like steps are relevant. And so from a scoring standpoint, I love the application of AI. I know that we're not rushing out to buy tools, but I think the one that I've seen doing what Carrie is talking about perhaps the best is ScaleStack. And I think they have kind of like that data waterfall application where they're aggregating from lots of vendors to try to help you complete the picture of the buyer persona and who to talk to and how to talk to them. I've seen them do this the best maybe so far. And then I also think that's going to keep evolving. Like, all the vendors are going to keep developing their features for this. So the vendor that you work with already, chances are they're going to have it soon. That tool, Carrie, was scalestack.ai. And so that's one that you can look into. But they're also really changing the model for how people are buying this third-party contact data, because they're kind of only selling you what you need. And so I see a big resurgence happening in that space. Clay, along with it, I think it's due for an upset. So I'm really excited to see what happens there.
Yeah. I think we lost Lindsay. So, but we're down.
She didn't like what I was saying. She had to go.
I'm out. Yeah, I think all of that is spot on. One thing that I'll add in there is, I mean, so one, it needs to be an iterative process. Like, there's a reason why people talk about training AI. Like, it's not a, hey, it spit something out and one and done. Like, you need to provide the feedback to it and be able to guide it and train it through that process, just like you would, like I said, a team member, a net new, member of your team or employee. And I wish Lindsay was here for this because she would have loved this. But I run a growth marketing agency on the side. We had a client that we onboarded not too long ago, and we asked them the same thing we ask all of our net new clients. It's like, hey, give us all of your documentation, all of the things you've built internally around personas, ICP, go to market, just data dump on us. And the vast majority of the time, we get like a page with like some bullet points on it or whatever, and it's like, all right, we're going to have to go figure this out for you. We finally had the opposite happen. Like, this was a company in the medical space, a highly, highly technical product, high 6-figure, 7-figure ACV, you get the idea. Like, this thing was a monster. And holy crap, did they have all that stuff dialed in. Like, they data dumped on me like 15 docs, PowerPoint presentations, written out docs, you name it. I mean, like, they had one PowerPoint that was 35 slides long, and like, it was all gold. And so I'm sitting there, I'm like, what do I like? I've now got to ingest all of this, get my arms around it, and then go find and be able to figure out what are the things I need to reference out of this and stuff. And so, just out of necessity, I just took the whole thing and fed it into ChatGPT. And I was like, generate summaries for each one of these, because I found if I tried to dump it all, like, it would mess it up and generate poor summaries. And so I did it on one by one. Yeah. And then after I did that, I was like, well, it has now all that information. It's all indexed. So then I could just go start asking it the questions about what I needed to pull out of it. And then I was like, oh, I can go ask it like basically any go-to-market question relative to this company or client. And it was like, so it's back to that, garbage in, garbage out. Like if you feed it a ton of really good detailed information, what you can pull out of it is amazing. And so, I mean, just building that GPT for them is arguably the most value add thing we've done for them.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. It was one of those like
imagine
stumbled
being
upon
a
it. It was like, wow, this is
salesperson.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah,
hey, I'm
imagine being
reaching
a
out to
salesperson
this.
who can build that.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Or even just being a salesperson equipped with that. Hey, I'm reaching out to this person with this title, this persona at this company. Generate for me talking points. And so it's like now you can do like really insane personalization. Like, hey, I saw you guys just raise this. You just brought on this team member. You just onboarded this piece of tech, whatever. And it's like now you can actually stack those things instead of just like, hey, I found my one little personalization nugget I'm going to drop in there. But yeah, it's pretty incredible whenever you build out these really sophisticated use cases, what all you can start doing with this stuff. But all right, we are at the top of the hour. If we didn't get to your question, I think we got to most of them. We will follow up. We'll pass these on and get back to anybody that we missed on it. Additionally, if you had anything that we didn't cover or questions that you didn't get to ask, please hit us up. We'll kick out a recap of this with a recording tomorrow, if not tomorrow. Should be tomorrow, if not Monday. I think that's everything. Mallory, has been great. Lindsay was great. I don't know where she had to bounce to, but this has been a fantastic conversation. I've really had a good time.
Yeah, same. Thank you. Lindsay had storms, so her connection dropped, but she wanted me to tell you guys bye. And it's been great. So thanks for having me.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.